And I want to remind everybody our next 2 Saturdays will be here also. All of our concerts will be here. And after the concert, please pick up your reception to go cookies, which will be under the tent in the back. And we have fresh baked cookies and water, so we can have a reception even though we can't like all touch the food or lick it and stuff. So it'll be safe. And next week we will have Catherine Lockwood and Yusuf Sharonik and their duo Jalal, and he plays the various percussion instruments. That's going to be very interesting, and she plays viola. And then we're ending our season with me and my husband Michael doing a show in honor of Astor Piazzolla's 100th anniversary, birth anniversary this year, a show of all tangos. So I want to welcome Bridget.
afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. It is such a treat to be inside this incredible space. And I do have fond memories of performing in that fantastic old mill, I believe from the 1700s nearby. And here we have a completely new venue. And I want to thank John, who's doing an amazing job on sound for those that are watching from home, and also to give you a bit of a boost here in this incredible shrine. Although it's really fun for me as a harpist to hear the resonance of the instrument change in different venues, and I really like it here. It's so fun to hear it bouncing off the roof and coming down and ricocheting a little bit. And so, of course, the Toccata and Fugue in D minor was not written for the harp. It was written for the mighty organ, which of course would have been performed in Gothic cathedrals in Germany in the 18th century. But I think we all, as musicians, love to beg, borrow, and steal from the Baroque era because it's so adaptable to a variety of instruments. And so discovering the works of J.S.BACH, to me, is like having a conversation between my voice and the birds, between my right hand and my left hand, interacting with a fugue. And when you have a fugue, you basically have, of course, row, row, row your boat, like a round happening with the same phrase that's passing around at different speeds. And so that is what we're talking about today. Counterpoint in motion. Can everyone hear me clearly on this mic, by the way? Fantastic. So counterpoint is when you have two people having a conversation. It's kind of like one person is saying, I'm going to go to the Blue Army Shrine. And someone else says, you are? And they're like, well, yes, I am. Well, I'm going too. It's going to be fun. And they have this batting back and forth of a conversation. And because it's a wonderful compositional device or something that composers use to create music, it's something that's really been used throughout history. And we're going to track that one concept of two lines weaving together, kind of saying the same thing at different times, layering on top of each other. We'll talk about that throughout the program. And that's why this program is called Counterpoint in Motion. So Bach and his contemporaries really started this wonderful effect of writing this fugues and all these overlapping lines. But then composers after them were so taken with it that they also used the same technique. So in this next piece, written by Benjamin Britten, who is British and of course lived many centuries later, he wrote for the harp an original piece that takes some old lines, old English hymn tunes, like you'll hear in the fifth movement, or perhaps a fugue in the fourth movement, or a toccata, all ricocheting and evoking the Baroque organ. And so this is, once again, Britten saying, well, the harp is going to become an organ in this piece and have all the different stops that it can work with to evoke an overture, first movement, toccata, a fugue, a nocturne, the sounds of night. You might even hear the little birds chirping in that one. And then, of course, the hymn. And now listen, we'll come together after the hymn, which is about a 15-minute piece, the whole suite, and we'll talk about the tune that makes the hymn at the end of this piece and see if you might recognize it. It's something that you might have heard at some point in your life. So this is Britten's Suite for Harp. You might recognize this hymn tune. So Britten was setting that, which is actually from the 15th century, in this incredible last movement, which is one of my favorite things to play, especially in an open, cavernous space like this that gives you all the room to play with resonance. So we're thankful to Benjamin Britten for being one of the harp's biggest champions. We're also thankful that when the harp came into existence, into the classical music scene, as we call it, it was actually quite late. Although we have some older instruments that predate classical music, it didn't really come to fruition to join modern-day orchestras or concert stages until the era of Debussy, Ravel, or in our next piece, Gabriel FAURÉ. And we love these French masters because when they heard the harp, they were, of course, like all of us that hear the harp, enamored with the vast color palette and sounds that this one instrument can make. And so they really exploited a new mechanism for the harp. Now, of course, we know that some of the best inventions come from competition, and in the 19th century, late 19th century in Paris, there were two piano makers vying to create the first concert harp. You had Pleyel, who commissioned Debussy to write his famous dances for harp and strings, and then you had Erard, another piano company that commissioned Maurice Ravel to write a piece for harp and strings and winds. And it was Ravel's harp that stuck. And I'm gonna tell you a little bit about it because it's not every day you have one in your living room here. So as you notice, the strings are color-coded so I don't get lost when I'm playing, all right? Sometimes when I shut my eyes and my hair blows in the wind, disaster is coming. It's important for me to watch what's happening on the strings. So we have a setup very much like the white keys of a piano. How many of you have seen Harpo Marx Stuck Soup, right? You know, that great scene where the piano is like totally broken. He takes the harp out of the piano, he turns it on its side. It's a great description of the harp. If you look inside the piano, you turn it up on its side, that is the harp. So we basically have the white keys of the piano in open position here. Let me play that for you. Right? Little C major scale. But we need all those sharps and flats to make all the keys work. So what's so exciting is that there's 7 pedals to the harp. a C pedal, a D pedal, E pedal, F pedal, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And connected to each pedal is a rod that's hidden by this beautiful column here that goes to the top of the instrument, connects to these little levers that you probably can't see from where you're sitting, and they push into the strings to shorten it by a half step. So when you see Michael and Laura be amazing on their piazzolla concert very soon, you'll see their fingers creating the actual frets. We don't do that as harpists, we use our feet. So you'll notice as I play one string, 3 different pitches ensue. C flat, C natural, C sharp, right? So we're always tap dancing when we play. So the French masters, Ravel, Debussy, FAURÉ, and Saint-Saëns, really like to showcase fancy footwork on the harp. And so I'm going to play a piece for you now by GABRIEL FAURÉ called Un châtelaine à sa tour, and my feet will be flying, but what's more important than that is that this piece is really wonderful in that, as we talk about in this program, everyone is getting inspiration from looking backwards, okay? So FAURÉ was very much inspired by the lords and ladies of the Renaissance era. And a châtelaine à sa tour is a woman in her castle waiting for her knight in shining armor who's playing his horn across the hill. Maybe like someone told me there's a beautiful house the next hill over from this lovely shrine where they cleared, and you can see for 60 miles through Pennsylvania. You know, she's waiting for her lover over there playing his horn to come across on his steed and come get her out of the castle. So that's what this piece is about. GABRIEL FAURÉ and châtelaine à sa tour. the wonderful Granada by, wow, I feel like we've gained some echo. Also, on the harp too. Thank you. Can you all hear me? Okay, I have a very loud voice, sadly, for you all. Anyway, ALBÉNIZ wrote this wonderful piece for piano, but he was also looking backwards because when Columbus asked Queen Isabella and Ferdinand if they would fund his voyage to the West Indies, they said no the first time because they were busy battling the Islamic Caliphate that was still in Granada. Okay, this is way back, of course, in the mid-1400s because they wanted to, the Queen of Spain, wanted to unify Spain and become a world trade superpower. So once they ousted all those Moors at the end of the 1400s, Columbus asked again if they would support his journey to the West Indies, and they said yes this time. As we know that 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Of course, he landed in the
Bahamas.
So, at that point, what ensued, of course, was for all the reasons, good, bad, and ugly. We had world powers vying for new trade routes and new companies and all the things that happened in modern-day South America. The silver lining is that for over 3 centuries, from, let's say, 1494 until today, you've had a melting pot of cultures, people groups, and musical aesthetics meeting each other in South America to create the songs and dance forms we all love. Tango, Jequibao, Maracatu Frevo, Joropo, salsa, a modern version of many of those things mixed together, cumbia, etc., etc., etc. And so the reason that that happened is that you had the Baroque courts of Europe and the Baroque aesthetic, which has kind of driven this entire program, starting to mix with the rhythms of Western Africa and also the indigenous melodies of the Amazonians, the Incas, the Aztecs, the people living in the Caribbean coast. And that melding created all of these wonderful song and dance forms, of course, culminating your season in tango. It's just perfect. So I'm going to play a tango written by someone who's living today, who lives in New Jersey, okay? PACQUITO D'RIVERA. He is fantastic. He's a jazz clarinetist, saxophonist. He really translates incredible music he grew up listening to in Cuba onto classical instruments. This is his first piece for the concert harp. I'm so excited he wrote it for me because we got to work together on it. And it's really lesser known that in the 1950s, when he was born in Cuba, tango was all the rage. You had all these bands traveling from Argentina through Cuba, and that created kind of this evolution of tango in Cuba. So this is kind of a Cuban tango, and the harp becomes, of course, that bandoneón accordion that's used to evoke the tango.
There's still a lot of echo coming from here. Yeah, I've noticed.
Okay.
because we can hear quite well in here, I'm wondering if you have any questions about the instrument, because again, here we are. Go for it.
How much does it weigh, and how do you transport it?
Yes, so I love that. Number one question, the harp, how do you move it? I make friends very easily, and two, it's not as heavy as it looks. It's kind of like a fourth grader. It's 80 pounds, it's hollow. My hand is in the back of it right now, but it's cumbersome. It fits in a RAV4 Toyota, great harp car, and I have a little hand strap back there, and you move it like a bunch of boxes on a trolley, so really not too bad. But when I travel to play, I only drive my harp. I never ship it in a plane. And harpists are very friendly, and we borrow each other's instruments always. So, yes, young lady.
How do you play it so beautifully?
How do I play the harp so beautifully? Oh, thank you. You know what's so fun about life and getting older is that you accumulate practice hours, and I find that this instrument is hard to make sound bad. Now, I used to play the oboe, and my parents sent me into the basement because I sounded terrible. But from the day the harp came home, I was front and center in the living room. There was a spotlight on it, you know, so the guests that came for dinner could hear me practicing. So first of all, this instrument to me is one of the most beautiful sounding in the world. But I think all of us that are pursuing the craft, we have, you know, a trajectory where we want to be going like this, but the reality is we're usually going like this. And I love the pursuit of beauty on this harp. And that's why I'm still a harpist. As long as I love pursuing what this instrument can do, I love working at it every day. Even some of those days when I don't feel like practicing, I make myself practice. And as a result, it kind of adds up to, hopefully, beauty. So, great question. Yes, the gray mask.
How often do you have to tune it?
Oh, great question. Does the harp stay in tune? You know, I tune it like CNN on the hour, every hour. No. It's very temperamental to like changes humidity, so I find if I tune it before a concert, I may have to check a few notes as I go along. If this were a full concert with intermission, I would be tuning during intermission again. But most instruments will hold. So, but like the piano, it's not like the piano. The piano has to be tuned maybe once a year. We tune this every time we play it. But it's great. It gets my ears kind of ready and woken up for a concert, so I enjoy that process. Yes?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
Okay.
Actually, the other thing is, I don't know if this was ever done, but besides using your fingers, did they ever use a bow with it?
Do we ever use a bow on the harp? You know what? It really doesn't make a lot of sound. Okay, so using like a string bow on the strings, we've done so on the metallic bass wires, and it kind of gets like a whoa sound. But I find it doesn't really, it can't compete with a cellist or a violinist, sadly. I mean, I wish I had a bow to express. My fingers are kind of my bow, right?
Yeah.
We make the music with our fingertips directly on the strings, which is why I love it so much. Yes, sir. Calluses are usually not so bad because if those of you who are sitting close, I like to massage the strings. I'm not whacking them too much. So it really is a massaging motion. But to be honest, in pandemic times, as we're playing outdoors at all times, your fingertips are always changing. So I have a little bit of a callus today. You know, changes by day. Yes? Oh. Thank you so much. Fabulous. Any more questions? Wonderful questions. Yes, in the back, you're going to have to shout. That's a great question. How do I come up with the pieces I want to play? Living in New York City and in this region of the world, by the way, I'm from Ohio, so driving up here I was like, oh, I'm home, wonderful. I have really been blessed with incredible neighbors from all over the world, and so I'm very collaborative as a harpist. I love to play solo, but a lot of pieces were pieces I commissioned by my friends or play with them. And so that's a great segue to our next piece, in that I really like to craft projects that showcase what the harp can do. In this context today, I decided, well, it's an hour concert. What can we do to show as much kind of snapshots of the harp throughout history? But I love to, like you see, adapt pieces that weren't written for the harp onto the instrument. So I kind of choose what I love, and I love variety. So I try to maintain being a chameleon and choose repertoire that really has a purpose on this instrument. Thank you. Okay, last question. Anybody? Yes, in the hat.
Why is the harp shaped like a heck of a harp?
Oh my goodness, that's an amazing question. Do we have any engineers in the room? We might. Why is the harp shaped like a half of a heart. Well, first of all, it touches my heart to play this instrument, and it rests on my heart when I play, and I actually feel my heart resonating when I play. But also, it is an engineering feat to fit 47 strings on an instrument in gradation of pitches. So, you know, a little tiny, a tiny mouse makes a high sound or a low sound? A little mouse, would it make like the sound, would it make a really low, huge sound like that, or a little high-pitched sound? A little high-pitched. An elephant, would it make a little high-pitched or a low sound? Low, exactly. So you have these really huge low strings all the way to the little mice, tiny, tiny little strings, and they have to fit on this instrument. So in order to do that, they had to come up with a shape that would not, that would allow my arm to be long enough to reach all of these strings with two hands. That's an amazing question. Well done, you. Okay, yes, sir.
Are there master harp makers that are sought after by concert harpists in the same way that there were, master, like Stradivarius?
Yes.
Master, violin makers?
Fantastic. Are there master harp makers? Sadly, our harps do not age like a Stradivarius violin. They have a half-life, so you drive it off the lot and you've lost half your value, and we all cry. But we do have master harp makers. This one is from Lyon & Healy in Chicago. Highly recommend calling in advance and asking for a tour. You can watch them making the instruments. It's incredible. We have one of the best harp makers in the world in our own country of USA. Lyon & Healy. There's another one in Milan called Salvi, and those are the two that harpists tend to play. Yes? Yes, in the back. Oh, that's really sweet. How dedicated to get to these results? Most musicians start when they're under 5 years old on something. And then, or not later in life, but then I remember, we practice hours per day throughout, like someone's in sports training, like athletes. So by the time we get to college, we have a sense that we want to do that for a life. But to me, that's just the beginning. And so I think the pursuit, again, of something excellent that we all do in our lives in different vocations and passions is a lifelong choice. And it feels like, to me, a mission. Like my mission is truly to expound to myself and to explore to myself and to the world what this piece of wood with open strings can do. And when I look at it that way, the sky's the limit, and I'm never bored with it, and I'm never done with that work. And I think the commitment is something, some days I don't feel as much as others, but I keep remembering that little nugget of passion, and that's something that just keeps driving that commitment. And then, of course, living in New York, there's so many great musicians that keep pushing me, and vice versa. And I can't wait to get back with my friends and do that very soon. So thank you for that wonderful question that just was so moving to me. All right, let's okay, one more and then we'll play some music. Yes? Yes. Great. Yes, you're on the track completely. How did the harp evolve to this today? What existed? What iterations of harp existed? Well, there were many, my friends, across the globe. You had, here we go, let's do a rundown. You have the zither in China, you have the Malian kora, you have the little Israeli harp, the lyre, that story of King Saul trying to spear David to the wall as he's playing to soothe his heart, and he's, oh my gosh, just trying to play my harp here. You have the Colombian janero, you have the Paraguayan harp, you have the Celtic clarsac, you have lever harps, you have the Grecian lyre that you see in a lot of old paintings and old hieroglyphs. You have basically an open set of strings from ancient history. But again, it evolved through the Baroque era as a lute. And that's when it started to kind of evolve into the classical music era, as we call it. And it was the French masters, of course, and the piano makers that decided to create an instrument that would evolve to match modern harmony, going from Debussy, the early 1900s, to today. And this mechanism has not changed since then. I think this is what we have, which is wonderful. If I just need one more hand, we'd be great. Just kidding. So this is our final iteration of the harp as we know it. Okay, I'd like to play one more piece by a friend of mine. Great question in the back about how do I choose the pieces I'd like to play. This is written by one of my favorite musicians. Samuel Torres is a Colombian Grammy-winning percussionist, conga player, also a brilliant composer, and we tour a project called BACQUITO de Brazil, and we have some things online if you'd like to check us out, that really explore the narrative of South American songs and dances more fully. And he wrote this piece for that project for harp and congas, but it also is beautiful as a solo piece. It's called Taken, and it really is about kind of mixing the FAURÉ type feelings of impressionism on the harp with modern day kind of Latin jazz. So this is Taken for harp.
Thank you.